On February 1st, 1790, the U.S. Supreme Court meets for the first time. The court had been established by Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution, which took effect in 1788. The Judiciary Act of 1789 provided for 6 justices who would serve for life. President George Washington appointed John Jay of New York as the first Chief Justice of the United States. Years earlier, Jay had traveled to France in the late stages of the American Revolutionary War to help Benjamin Franklin and John Adams negotiate the Treaty of Paris, which officially ended the war. Jay also aided James Madison and Alexander Hamilton in writing the Federalist Papers, which helped convince the American people to support the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. He also negotiated the so-called Jay Treaty with Britain in 1794, which helped avoid a potential war. Along with Jay, 5 associate Supreme Court justices were chosen from across the new country. Let's look at each of them. Associate Justice John Rutledge of South Carolina was an early patriot who had served as a delegate to the 1765 Stamp Act Congress and participated in the Constitutional Convention. At that convention, he served as the chairman of the Committee of Detail, which was tasked with producing the first full draft of the Constitution. Associate Justice William Cushing had previously served as Chief Justice of the Massachusetts Superior Court. He is believed to be the last U.S. judge to wear a full wig. Associate Justice James Wilson was a Scottish-born legal scholar from Pennsylvania who, like Rutledge, had helped create the U.S. Constitution. He was best known during the Constitutional Convention for being one of the most democratic-minded delegates. He raised a strong voice in support of the role of the common people in government. Wilson was, in fact, one of the few delegates who believed the right to vote should not be limited to property owners, and also advocated for the direct election of U.S. senators. Neither of those ideas made it into the Constitution's final draft. Associate Justice John Blair of Virginia was yet another delegate to the Constitutional Convention. Perhaps this is not surprising, since George Washington, who was the president of the convention, would have gotten to know those men very well throughout that summer of 1787 in Philadelphia. During the Revolutionary War, Blair had participated in the framing of both the Virginia Constitution and the Virginia Declaration of Rights. Today, you can find his home at Colonial Williamsburg. Associate Justice James Iredell of North Carolina had helped organize his state's court system during the Revolutionary War and served as North Carolina's 3rd Attorney General. Although he did not participate in the Constitutional Convention, he was a strong supporter of the ratification of the document, which was a particularly lengthy and painstaking process in North Carolina. Another potential original Associate Justice, Robert Harrison of Maryland, was nominated by Washington and confirmed by the Senate, but he declined the appointment, likely due to his failing health. He died, in fact, just 6 months after his nomination. The Supreme Court's first meeting on February 1, 1790, included only 4 justices: Cushing, Jay, Blair, and Wilson. They met in the Old Royal Exchange Building in New York City, which was, at the time, serving as the nation's first capital city. The court heard its first cases in 1791, with its first opinion delivered in the case of West v. Barnes on August 3rd of that year. Today, a seat on the Supreme Court is both powerful and prestigious, but it wasn't always that way. Although Jay is notable for being the first Chief Justice, he doesn't stay long, resigning in 1795 to become New York's governor. Rutledge's tenure as an Associate Justice was even shorter. He resigned after less than 18 months in March 1791 to take a judgeship back in South Carolina. This was before the U.S. Supreme Court had even heard its first case. In fact, Washington had trouble keeping the court fully stocked. After Jay's resignation, Washington actually lured Rutledge back to the court by appointing him as Chief Justice. Because the Senate wasn't in session at the time, Rutledge served as a recess appointment. After the court completed its fall session, Washington then formally nominated Rutledge, but the Senate, for the first time in U.S. history, rejected the appointment. Interestingly, due to Rutledge's outspoken opposition to the Jay Treaty. Rutledge's total time as Chief Justice was just 138 days. Washington then nominated Oliver Ellsworth of Connecticut in 1796. He served as Chief Justice for the remaining months of Washington's presidency and most of second U.S. President John Adams' only term. During his lame duck period, Adams and his fellow Federalists sought to remake the judiciary. As part of the plan, Adams appointed his Secretary of State John Marshall as the nation's fourth Chief Justice. It changed everything. Marshall transformed the U.S. Supreme Court into a force. He fully established the court's power of judicial review, which is the power to declare laws unconstitutional. He served as Chief Justice for 34 years, reshaping the judiciary into a truly co-equal branch of government. Because of Marshall, no U.S. president will ever again struggle to find someone willing to serve on the Supreme Court. Here are other events that happened today in history. In 1884, the 15-volume Oxford English Dictionary, the world's most comprehensive, is first published. In 1917, during World War I, a desperate Germany reinstates its policy of unrestricted submarine warfare. In 1960, 4 black college students stage a sit-in at a lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina. In 1974, serial killer Ted Bundy kills his first confirmed victim, a University of Washington student. In 1976, the first federally recognized Black History Month begins in the United States. In 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia disintegrates during re-entry, killing all 7 astronauts on board. In 2021, Myanmar's military seizes control of the country in a coup and detains the nation's civilian leader. And now, it's time for our Today in History quiz. What was the name of the ill-advised shortcut the Donner Party took on its route to California? Hastings Cutoff, Bridger's Cutoff, Fremont's Cutoff, or Lansford's Cutoff? Think you know the answer? Drop your guesses in the comments below. Find out if you're right tomorrow on Today in History.